Good evening. My name is John Kay, the Socialist Resurgence. I'd like to introduce Osman Kay, PhD student in economics, a member of Socialist Resurgence, on the topic of money and finance. Take it away.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here. My name is Osman. I'm a member of Socialist Resurgence. First, let me thank you all for coming to this webinar, and I want to thank all my comrades for putting this all together. The idea for this webinar came about after I gave a short educational series on the basics of Marxist economic theory. We're entering an exciting era. We're witnessing the ideas of Marx slip slowly but steadily back into our political discourse, and I thought it might do well to build on the foundations of wage labor, surplus value, capital, and class conflict into more advanced topics and applications in order that we can better critique, discuss, and organize around the complexities of the modern global capitalist system. With that in mind, what I'll be talking about today assumes at least a passing familiarity with the basic concepts of Marx's political economy and his dialectical method, though you can get by even without that. What I'll be talking about today is the Marxist account of money, finance, and credit. After that first educational series, I said, yeah, I could do money. It turns out money is a pretty big topic. So this is going to be more like an overview. I'll touch on a few topics and then hopefully we can address a little bit more of it during the QA. Now I want you to think about money for a second. If you've ever taken an econ class, a mainstream one, actually, hold on, let me just share my screen right now. There we go. If you've ever taken an econ class, just a regular mainstream one, do you remember talking about money? If you have ever taken a microeconomics class, you might catch on to the fact that you never talk about money, almost never talk about money. We assume that labor is traded directly for goods and goods are directly traded for each other. We may sometimes talk about prices in terms of dollars, but even this is sort of a weird stand-in for utility that lives in each individual's head. In a macro class, you might talk a little bit more about money. Usually start with these, the classic features of money. Money is a store of value. Money is a measure of account. Money is a medium of exchange. And you'll stop talking about it while you spend the rest of the semester on neoclassical growth models that ignore money for the most part. At the very end, if you're lucky, you'll have time to learn about the function of the central bank who controls the money supply, only to learn that in the long run, money is neutral. That is, the only thing that the central bank can do is change prices. There's a monetary sector and there's a real sector, and never the twain shall meet. As long as the fundamentals of the productive economy are good or bad, there's nothing the money side can do to change it, except to cause inflation. After taking too many econ classes, it almost sounds kind of reasonable. We're human beings after all, and we don't care about money. We don't care about money as such. We can't eat paper or gold if you prefer. We care about the things that money can buy. If money, debt, and financial instruments make the production and exchange of goods more efficient, so much the better, right? And thus a generation of sound money, balanced budget loving, gold standard pushing libertarians were born. Yet, cash still rules everything around us. At the micro level, no matter how good we are at what we do for work, it is meaningless unless we can find some way to exchange it for money. On the other hand, in order to get good at various things that it seems like other people will pay us money for, we have to go into crushing amounts of debt and are therefore forced into a lifetime of either soul-crushing deprivation or long hours at decently paying jobs when we'd rather be doing something else. Take a look at, for example, the steady brain drain of physicists, mathematicians, engineers into the financial services industry. On the other end of the scale, nations are made and broken by the interest rates that their sovereign bonds attract on international financial markets. If the interest rate on your country's bond gets too high, you'll find yourself crushed under snowballing interest payments. And how do you get the interest rate under control again? You assure the ratings agencies and big institutional investors that you care more about your financial obligations to your creditors than you do about your citizens' welfare. You take an axe to public health, education, employment, and housing. You implement austerity. This is exactly what happened to Greece after 2008 and last year in Argentina with its sixth default in the past century. This is what's going on right now with state and local governments in the United States in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. So it's clear that money, finance, and debt are not neutral. Money reflects power, but it's a very particular sort of power, and we underestimate it at our peril. One more illustrative point before I continue on to the meat of this presentation. We are in the midst of a public health crisis in this country that, by all accounts, is spiraling out of control. It is in some ways a perfect attack on the social relations that hold capitalism together. The best way to stop COVID-19, barring a miracle vaccine, is to stay home in complete opposition to the factory discipline required for capitalist production. But why don't we? Surely we could hit a pause on the economy for a while. We need to produce food and other essentials, and there are some production processes that are difficult to start once stopped. But for the most part, it could be done. But what would happen if you stopped paying rent, for example? The apartment isn't going anywhere. The land won't disappear. But your landlord has a piece of paper that entitles him to a piece of all future income that you receive, called a lease. Your landlord's bank probably has a piece of paper that entitles it to a piece of all future income he earns, called a mortgage. And his bank's bank has a piece of paper that entitles it to a piece of all the income on all the mortgages held by the bank, called a mortgage-backed security. And the holder of that security, let's call it Goldman S., has a bet with Jean Piermont S. that none of these mortgages will go into default, known as a credit default swap. Now that we're looking at a world where unemployment claims look like this, the simultaneous extreme pervasiveness and fragility of the financial system becomes apparent. We can think of it as an enormous network of distributed power projection, and when it fails big. So let's talk about Marx. Marx begins his analysis of money in Volume 1, Chapter 3 of Capital. He talks primarily about commodity money, that is, commodity that is backed by some sort of commodity, typically gold. Right here, we run into one of the major problems in giving a Marxist account of money and finance. A more detailed analysis of money, debt, and credit is given in Volumes 2, 3, and Theories of Surplus Value. Unfortunately, none of these were completed at the time of Marx's death, and they were edited together by Engels as best as he could manage. The sections on money were apparently especially difficult to put together, and many later theorists like Hilferding, de Brunoff, David Harvey, and Fred Mosley filled in the gaps. Marx's initial presentation of money begins immediately after his account of commodities. This makes sense in that for Marx, money is a commodity. If we recall the definition of a commodity, it is something that is produced for the purpose of exchange on the market. So a little refresher for the Marxist terminology: commodities, a product of the labor process that is produced for market exchange. Use value is the particular good of a produced good that satisfies human need, and the exchange value is the value of a commodity in terms of its ability to exchange with other commodities. So, this money commodity, it has a use value. Commodities in general have use values, which is the quality of satisfying human needs. Exchange value, which is the quality of being tradable. You'll also recall that the basis for exchange value, that is the commonality between two goods, two commodities, lies in the fact that they're both produced by socially necessary abstract labor. socially necessary abstract labor is